everybody. Today we're going to go through the various sections of AegisFlow to familiarize yourself with the cockpit, so to speak, of this workflow for Stable Diffusion. We're going to start out by going over the interface as a whole. Usually when you first come in, this may be zoomed in a little bit, so you might have to use your middle mouse button or hotkeys in order to see the entire workflow like I'm showing you here. There are a few main sections that you're going to be concerned about with the workflow. The first is over here. This is where you'll set up certain file naming conventions as well as your loader and your sampler. This is our conditioning or our prompts. Below that there is a preprocessor section that is used to take Controlnet images that you feed it and then based on your choices run it through a preprocessor to develop your Controlnet image. The section also has some padding information in this little box here. We'll go into these in a more zoomed in view in just a moment. To the right of that is an effects and post-processing pipeline, which you can turn on and off with this switch. To the right of that, just big old logo, because why not? I like things to be blocked. Directly above that is sort of the heart of the system. And what this does is it takes all of your inputs, whether it's conditioning or control nets or LoRa's or whatever, and it uses those along with the loader and sampler over here to generate your images. Up above there, these are the saver nodes. You really won't have to touch these, but we will go over what they do. And to the right here is the Iterative Upscaling. The benefit of this is, as you'll see later, this can improve your images and also allow you to change certain things about your images with the additional conditioning that you can inject at this stage. These are all controlled by switches, and that's a library of templates that is going to hopefully be continuously growing with your support. So with that, I appreciate it, and we'll move on to describing each section specifically. This little section up here are simply a series of redirects so that if you are going to add in templates, if you're someone that's purchased AegisFlow or a member, you'll be able to add on things like faces or let's go down here and put in IPMix, other workflows that effectively allow you to do some extra operations. And that's a library of templates that is going to hopefully be continuously growing with your support. So with that, I appreciate it, and we'll move on to describing each section specifically. All right, first up, let's talk about the seed, project, and model sampler setup section. You're going to probably want to start here initially, and that is because you're going to want to fill in your output folder path. This will be created under ComfyUI/outputs and is where AegisFlow will store all of the images that you generate with it. It can also be changed, so you could have multiple output folders. Say if you had multiple projects for multiple clients. Perhaps this is the name of a client of yours or the name of a project in your studio. Then down here is the project name that you're working on, and this would be something like a character's name, or if this was a character's name, this might be some aspect of the character, like in snow clothes or whatever. Down below that, the seed number is by RG3. I like to use new fixed random here, like so, and then leave it as I make adjustments. Down here in Efficient Loader, you can put in your checkpoint name and your optional VAE name. Many of them nowadays have baked VAEs, and it'll oftentimes say. Otherwise, when you're working with 1.5, this MSE 84 or 840,000 works pretty well. Clip skip, -2 is a good setting generally, but play around with that. You can get some interesting effects and some interesting looks through that. The LoRa name, while you could technically put a LoRa in here, I generally use the LoRa stacker, which we'll cover in the next section under conditioning. And then down here, we have our sampler, where you will put your steps. This is how many iterations the AI is going to take to get to your eventual image. The config, this is a measurement of how much freedom the AI has to interpret your prompts. And then a variety of other steps, of other options that we're not going to really go over right now. For the most part, they're okay, and you can leave them as is. Your sampler, you may want to play around with different sampler and scheduler types to see what images you get out of it. I've pre-generated images. This is an okay image. It's not amazing. There's some issues with it, and very specifically, there's a reason I allowed it to be not amazing. We're going to go over that later when we talk about the Iterative Upscaler. Further on down, our image grid is basically just going to pump out the number of images that we tell it to per generation. Then this is something to note within AegisFlow in general. Notes are dark blue, and switches are this brownish yellow color. So that should help when you're working further out in identifying switches and stuff. After a while, even when you're zoomed way out, you'll remember what these switches do after a period of time. So we're going to move back up to the top here, really quickly go over the random number injector, which is here. What this basically does is creates a bit.ly style alphanumeric code that gets appended to the end of your file name. And the reason for that is that sometimes as you get close to a really good image, you're going to keep your seed and a variety of other things the same, but you might want to keep all of the smaller iterations that you're doing with that same seed. So in the beginning, a lot of times you'll try different seeds out to see what looks good. By default, in order to prevent your hard drive from getting filled up with 1,000 terrible iterations before you find that one good one, we overwrite each time. So if you're going to be generating using the same seed number like I do, like new fixed random, and this switch is not on, then each time you generate with a new slightly different set of settings, it's going to overwrite your image. And so if you want to prevent that, you can turn this on and it'll give you the file name or seed number, and then at the end it'll apply a small code so that you don't overwrite your stuff automatically. Down below there's a free U option. Free U is a new tool, a fairly new tool that is. I suggest that you read about it first. I've put the links to the original paper and whatnot up in the description here, and I'm using the FreeU Advanced Plus node in order to use the FreeU tool. That is switch controlled here. Finally, we're going to go down to the latents. The latents are basically how big this image is going to be, the aspect or the dimensions of the image that it's going to try to produce. That is going to be controlled down here by this numerical switch. So if you set it to 1, it's going to use the size of the image that you pass it via the Controlnet section. If you set it to 2, you're going to be using this box here, the SDXL empty latent image. I know that this is a 1.5 workflow, but these dimensions work pretty well for 1.5 and XL, so it just makes it simple. Then down below that, if you set it to 3, you can fill in any custom value here that you want to fill in. Generally, I'm using Controlnets because it's usually sketches and things that I've done, and I want to iterate on them, so I want the Controlnet to define the size of the latent. And that is it for the sampler setup and project naming area. All right, next up we're going to go into the prompts and stylers section. This is also where you put in what's typically called conditioning. Conditioning is what we use to tell the AI what we want to see and what we don't want to see when it does its production. It is consisting of some stylers. Those are in black on the left-hand side here. There's the artist styler, mile high styler, and the fan styler. On the right, we have a LoRa stack. This is where you would turn on or off various LoRas that you might want to apply to your image, as well as the weighting for the clip and the model for each. In this system. So that's really generally enough for anybody, honestly. Once you start stacking various tons of items here are controlled through numerical switches, so styler on, styler off. The 1 is off, 2 is on. And then we have our positive prompt, what we want to display. Negative prompt, what we don't want to display. There's also a fans prompt styler, which allows you to pick some styles. Right now I have the great Sebastian Kampf, his styles, which negative styles, which are pretty good. A simple negative prompt or nothing at all. And then down here are the switch values to enable or disable the artist styler. Right now, none of them are enabled. So regardless of what I put here, it doesn't matter because the switch is turned off. I'm going to keep that set as 1. Mile High styler tends to concern itself more with overall looks, right? So abstract culture or abstract sculpture, abandoned asylum, things like that. So not specific artists, but more like moods and that sort of thing. These will eventually be replaced by a single node that'll handle all the stylers. So they'll basically just be one switch to turn them all on and off. And that is effectively our conditioning section. Pretty simple. Okay, let's cover ControlNet operations. So what is a ControlNet first of all? A ControlNet allows you to take an image and then by combining it with a ControlNet model and often a preprocessor, it allows you to guide your image towards a certain composition or look or style. In this case, we're using a sketch that I did of a warrior woman, and we are using the line art anime ControlNet model in order to make our guidance produce an image that is reminiscent of that same image, but while being obviously very different. So this section's pretty easy to understand once you kind of understand what's going on. You're going to start off with your chosen image. You are then going to go over to the left here and select through this switch a processor or a preprocessor that's appropriate for what you're trying to achieve. So in this case, I'm trying to achieve this composition of this woman when I do my final art. In that case, over here, I've selected line 2, which is normal line art. I could also assign it to 3, anime line art, 4, manga line art. I could really do just about any of these. Any of these would work. I could use color 6, but that's not really appropriate because what that's going to do is just basically make it think that I want a black and white image, right? Which is not what we're going for. So here, the one appropriate for our use is 2, 3, or 4. We're going to go with 2. And once you do that and you queue your prompt up, it's going to take this image and run it through the preprocessor and deliver to you a ControlNet image, which will be shown down here in the image preview. Additionally, there is an easy padding section here, which allows you to add a little bit of padding to the sides of your image. The reason that you might want to do that is sometimes an image might be too closely cropped, and you just want to have a little bit of extra room when you do your generation around the edges. That prevents you maybe from later having to go in and do extra post-processing, to add in more stuff like generative fill in Photoshop or whatever. Other than that, you can bypass the control net in general right here, and that will turn off the control net guidance. However, it will not turn off the control net latent size. So right here, this goes through some processing to basically turn it into the nearest SDXL size, the nearest SDXL resolution, and it will select that automatically. If, therefore, you go over here and you are trying to get, say, a square image, but you forget to set this setting, you're not going to get, a square image. So make sure that if you're trying to turn ControlNet off completely, like so, and that you don't want to use this latent size here, that you go also over to this latent and select something like number 2 here and pick the size that's appropriate for what you're trying to achieve. All right? So going back over here, afterwards you might want to select a ControlNet model that matches what you're trying to achieve. In this case, I'm using Lionheart Anime. There are others, though, that could work. In here, like there's a soft edge tensor, safe tensors here, soft edge FP15, that also would produce nice results with this kind of an image here. That is the ControlNet section. All right, we're going to go over the adjustments section. Now, I've turned on my lines for a moment here, and the reason for that is because we're going to show you how you might modify this just a little bit for your own uses. But in general, what you've got going on here are 2 effects pipelines in one. There is the adjustments bypasser and the FX bypasser. And you can see that there's a series of switches here. And when I click them on and off, I enable or disable certain sorts of image post-processing. Right now, we're just going to leave saturation on. We're just bumping up the saturation of our generated image a little bit and leave it at that. On the effects bypasser, this is things like Gaussian blur, film grain, etc. And you can do the same by enabling and disabling them here. You can also bypass the entire effects pipeline by simply choosing this here. This all gets fed into this collapsed node. Normally, like I said, this will be collapsed if you're not adding something in for your own custom purposes. But I'm going to go ahead and expand it here so you can kind of see what's happening, right? If you choose 1, the image is coming directly from the generated image and then shooting out over here, right? So no processing is happening. If you go to 2, that's where things get fed in through this processing node. So the procedure to add a new one would basically be to go ahead and add your node, let's say color correct, right, down here, and then you would drag this image node down here, right, and then connect the final image node up to image 2, right? That will effectively allow you to add in a new node for operation. And you can do that in the middle as well, but it's sometimes a little harder. So if I'm going to change things, I like to change it at the end here. And that's about it for this section. It's pretty simple to do, pretty simple to understand. So let's move on. All right, this is the main files section of AegisFlow. And this is where we generate all the various images based on your file name choices, is how we'll name them. And we will use the various settings under conditioning and your adjustment settings in order to tell the machine what to do. So we have on the far left here the unprocessed. This is basically the output straight out of the sampler. Then we have over here the processed image. This is after it goes through the FX pipeline. As I note up here, if you don't have the pipe on, or if you've got turned the pipe off, this image and this image will be identical. You have a line art image, a shadow map, highlight map, normal map, and depth map that you can use in external programs like Photoshop or Blender. Finally, down here in the bottom left, there is a color palette. You can set that to any number that you want, and it will try to extrapolate from your image a number of colors that are most common in your image. And you can use that if you're, say, combining raster imagery with vector imagery in Illustrator or something along those lines, and you want to have a nice consistent color palette that you can use to keep everything nice and tight. Finally, there are a couple of switches. In this section, I don't currently have them as yellow, but I probably should, and I will eventually update those. But these switchers allow you to choose between different types of depth map and normal map processing. There's also some modifications, obviously, or settings that you can put for pencil sketch, image shadow and highlights, and this empty image is merely there for satisfying some needs of the workflow itself, so you don't really have to worry about that. Initially, when you first start generating, since you probably haven't found or settled on a seed and prompt combination that really works for you, a lot of times I will turn this off with the bypass extra image creation. That way I'm merely creating the image and its adjusted version of that image. And the reason for that is just speed. Why generate these images over and over again if you are not trying to keep those images, right? If they're not really quality. Wait until you find the right look, then go ahead and turn this back on, generate, and you'll get a nice little suite of all of the images that you might need. Finally, over here there is an upscaler, and a standard upscaler, that is. Right now it's just real Esargan X2, but you could have dozens of these. There are all sorts of upscalers available, and I would encourage you to try them out. You can either bypass the upscale with one or upscale with two. It will still produce an upscaled image if you bypass it, but it won't go through all of the process of upscaling, so it'll save you a little bit of processing power, and it'll make your generations faster. Once you've decided, okay, this image looks good, that's when you might want to turn this on and process. Right below that, there's the type of image from over here that you're doing the upscaling on. So you might want to upscale the processed image, which is the default at 1, or maybe you want to do the unprocessed or the line art, or maybe you want to do them all, right? In which case you are going to go through and choose, the option that you want to choose, and generate, choose, generate, choose, generate. And the naming system will actually tag this onto your upscaled, so it'll say like underscore upscale underscore process, right? So that you can kind of keep track of that. That's basically it for the main file section. There are a series of savers up here, and honestly, you're probably not going to be up here very often. You might choose for your own purposes to come up here and make some modifications, like maybe you like JPEGs instead of PNGs, or maybe you need TIFFs or whatever. That's where you would set those parameters up here. You can also change your overwrite mode if you wanted to, but my preference is that I don't. I just don't want to have 10,000 terrible images and one good one. I want to find the good image, and then I want to keep that one image. So I have that turned on all the way across the board, and I use the bit.ly number thing over on the left in order to enable me to have the same seed number with multiple images if I so desire to do that. The last thing is there's this embed workflow option down here, true or false. Just to save hard drive space, I only enable or embed the workflow on the unprocessed, processed, line art, and upscaled versions of images. The rest of them won't have the workflow stored because the workflows can get kind of big, and it's just a bunch of unnecessary hard drive space regardless. So if you have one of these images, you're going to be able to have all the rest of the images, and they'll all be grouped together. So you just, if you need to go back to that specific set of settings, you can load the workflow from processed, unprocessed, line art, or your upscaled image, if you so prefer. And that's about it for the file section. All right, last couple of things. We're going to talk about the Iterative Upscaler. The Iterative Upscaler takes an image that you put into it, and it upscales it over a number of iterations. Amazing, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to choose, first off, our upscale factor. And let's say that we wanted to do 2 here, right? And then we tell it a number of steps that we want it to use to take, or that we want it to take to get to 2. If we were to do 2 steps, it would go from 1 to 1.5, 1.5 to 2. If we did it in 4, you'd get 1.25, 1.5, 1.75, 2, etc., etc. You can math, so I'm not going to belabor that point. The number of steps, though, each one is an independent generation, and so when you do it, you will see in your prompt window this will actually run multiple times. It'll actually have the green bar, and it'll go boing, 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 boing for however many steps that you have here. Depending upon how many steps you put into the sampler, which we'll go over in a second over on the right here, that can take a long time or very short time. So up above, there's some settings, or some switches rather. One is whether you're going to use the original conditioning, meaning way over on the left, the prompts that you put in for both your positive and your negative, or whether you can switch it over to 2 here and use positive and negative conditioning additions. So this will concatenate conditioning onto your original conditioning and use it to inform your next generation. This can be used to kind of make minor changes to your output in the final iterated upscale. A lot of times I'll just keep it at 1, but it's that's if I'm trying to just do generalized fix-ups, let the computer handle that, or if I really need to do something specific, that's when I'll turn it on and give some prompt guidance here. All of these are just reroutes, so you don't really need to worry about these. In AegisFlow, if something's collapsed, generally you don't have to worry about it. So just sort of leave it alone. Finally, down here, there is a use original seed or use new seed. That is choosing whether you want to use the seed that you generated when you first made the image, or whether you're going to use this new seed here. And this new seed, just to be very clear, when you do this generation, I use the seed name from the original seed regardless. So there's a reason for that. It's because we want to tie this image by seed to all of the other original images that we've used so that they're grouped logically. If we were to do this, it would appear to be an entirely new image. So the seed name for when we do our saving over here on the right comes from this from the original seed number, not this number. You select that by either choosing 1 here for the original seed or 2 here for the new seed. New seed tends to bring about some pretty good, interesting results. So I usually use new seed. Down here we have these 2 settings, and by putting them at different numbers, you will get different results. The denoise is how much noise it's going to introduce into your original image so that it can make modifications during the upscale. the target config. This number I found 10 seems to work pretty well, but play around with it. You can play around with higher denoises and lower configs, or you can play around with lower denoise and higher configs. Either one can generate pretty good results. If these numbers start getting way too low or way too high, you either might see way too many changes and your image no longer has a bearing or resemblance to the other one, or maybe you don't change enough and you basically wasted a bunch of your time. So try out these default settings, see what happens for you. Finally, the upscale provider is down here. So effectively, this is a sampler, and we are using nearest exact, but you can also choose area and bilinear if that's your preference. The number of steps for each generation. So if you had, say, 2, as we do here, 2 steps, then you will run through 40 total steps in order to get from step 1 to the end. The config is like config always is. CFG is how much leeway the computer has in interpreting all of the prompts and all the conditioning that you're feeding it. The denoise, similar. How much denoise that you introduce affects how much it can change. Which images or which pieces are allowed to be changed. Finally, the tiled VAE, if you turn that on, it'll try to use tiling in order to work on perhaps larger sized images. If your computer is a commercial machine, maybe that's not applicable to you, but for most of us on consumer hardware, this can be an issue if you're trying to make, say a 6x upscale or something like that all at once. That can be really tough on the GPU or CPU if you're, God forbid, using that. And in any case, I tend to leave this disabled unless I get an out-of-memory error, and then I'll turn it on. That ends up yielding results like so. So these are 2 images side by side. I'll try to kind of get them maximized here in my window. There we go. So on the left is our original image, right? And it's not terrible, but it's not great, right? There's definitely some clunkiness to it, particularly in the eyes, but also nose and mouth too. There's just a few things about this image that aren't quite hitting it. Like you look at the ear here, that's a little funky. The detailing in the hair, the highlighting, all of these things are not so hot, right? They're good, but they're not great yet. And so with a really quick, simple upscale, we were able to fix most of those problems pretty handily. And so the resulting image on the right has better eyes, better highlighting, better construction of things like this ear. Even the mouth, is better. You can see the teeth a little better. It's got the bow shape that you would expect instead of sort of this ovally top and the, snaggletooth that you got going on there. There's also significantly better detailing, more realistic detailing in her clothing here. And if I, bring these up, we can see that the folds are also more realistic. Skin tone, similarly, a little bit better. And her staff here that she's using is also significantly better. It's got that ray skin style sword handle pattern that's really not present over here. So overall, other than say maybe this belt area here, the image is overall better, right? So with that is the Iterative Upscaler. We can use this to improve our images significantly and not have to work too hard in doing it. It's pretty nice. Alright guys, thank you from Orbit for watching. I really appreciate you taking the time to check out AegisFlow, and I hope that it helps you explore your art in new and interesting ways. Join us on our Discord, link in the description, or alternately, pick us up over at majorstudio.gumroad.com if you don't yet have it and you want it. All right, talk to you guys later. Thank you.